think that the old idea of objectivity, or even objectivity being always something that's an impossible thing to be, right? You can't perfectly be objective, but the idea was we would try. And we would try to keep our eyes open and keep our minds open and be curious and responsive.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Crazy Good Turns, the podcast that recognizes and celebrates people who do great things for others. I'm your host, Frank Blake, and today we have as our guest the incredibly talented journalist and author, Nellie Bowles. I am thrilled to have Nellie as a guest. Nellie wrote for the New York Times from 2017 to 2021 and received several awards for her journalism. But in 2021, she left the New York Times and launched what is now called the Free Press with her wife, Bari Weiss. As you will hear, she was moved to do this because she became frustrated with journalism that was one-dimensional. And her approach is more that of a traditional reporter, not an advocate. And that is something increasingly rare in today's media environment. And for Nellie, it hasn't come without a cost. In fact, Nellie's new book, Morning After the Revolution, Dispatches from the Wrong Side of History, describes her journey from being a young, idealistic New York Times reporter to where she is today. She's written on many of the most contentious issues of our time, from the George Floyd protests to defund the police, DEI, and so on. Her writing on those topics, I'd say, was fundamentally sympathetic about the point of view of those protesting, but also clear-eyed about where those movements may have gone too far. And it was that act, remaining clear-eyed and continuing to ask questions when she was told not to, that was viewed by many in her circle as, quote, betraying the tribe. And the extraordinary thing is that Nellie was willing to risk her career and her friendships in pursuit of the truth. It takes courage, I'd say great courage, to engage with controversial topics, and that's even more true if you're willing to engage them with an open mind and not just seek to support your already held beliefs. I think it is a crazy good turn for all of us to do that. In our show today, Nellie and I will discuss, first, her new book and what led her to write it, her work for the Free Press today and how it and other publications like it open up new avenues for journalists and writers. We'll discuss a surprising thing that objectivity and kindness have in common. And finally, Nellie will reveal a childhood mentor who set her on her path and helped her become who she is today. It's a great story and shows the impact we can have on one another. I truly think there's a lot we can learn from Nellie and her story and her courage, and I'm excited to bring it to you. If you enjoy it, I encourage you to sign up for a chance to win a free copy of Morning After the Revolution. We'll be giving away 50 copies of her book. Sign up by visiting crazygoodturns.org and look for our episode page with Nellie. You'll see a link there. And now, here's our interview with the extraordinary Nellie Bowles. Well, Nellie, this is a real privilege to have you on the show, and congratulations on your book. It's terrific.
Thank you so much.
I have to start with a story, which is my sister was visiting here from London just a couple of days ago, and she's a writer. She's written over 12 books, and she's done well writing. And she sits down and she sees your book and she picks it up and she reads it cover to cover. And afterwards she puts it down, and actually I'm going to have one question from her in this interview, but she puts it down and she said, well, tell her she's a really good writer. And for my sister, that's high praise. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. Tell her thank you. That's so, so kind.
It's a well-written book. And I love early on, I think in the introduction, you have a quote saying, my ideal reader feels a little tribeless, a person of curiosity whose politics are more exhaustion than doctrine. That has to count for a lot of us. Could you explain where that comes from as a description of your ideal reader.
It comes from trying to describe myself a little bit. In the book, I document the change both happening in society over the last 4 or 5 years and also within myself. And part of that was going from being someone who's kind of an ideologue, or at least very committed to being along with one party, to being someone who felt a little out of sorts with that and felt a little not connected to one ideology and one right answer. And I think that a lot of Americans are feeling that way and looking at the left and the right and thinking neither of these things really describe me quite right. And neither party feels like the perfect home. And yeah, just most people aren't as flat as our current political moment would have us believe, and aren't as simple. Their politics aren't every single plank of the most progressive agenda, or nor are they every single plank of Trump's agenda. People are a messy mix of a lot of ideas and a lot of opinions, and just being comfortable with that, and being like, as a writer and as a journalist, being okay with not being on an ideological crusade necessarily.
So I love the subtitle of your book. The title of your book is The Morning After the Revolution. The subtitle is Dispatches from the Wrong Side of History, which I guess is a reference to what one of your editors at the New York Times told you. Would you describe a little of the background to that?
Yeah, so when I first started doing reporting in 2020 and 2021 on some of the things that we weren't supposed to cover, which for those years was a lot of things. And it happened to be the most interesting stories in America were sort of off limits. A lot of what was going on in American cities with Antifa/BLM protesters making these autonomous zones where they would take over a few blocks and claim it as a new city, or just tons of different stories that were happening that we were basically all in lockstep supposed to not cover and ignore. And that was really hard for me. And I ignore it because covering it would have been helpful for Republicans, would have been helpful for conservatives.
Or other side, yeah.
Yeah, and the project was you don't want to give them fodder. Why would you want to embarrass the movement when there's a lot of good, and sure there's some silliness, but we need to ignore it because we don't want to give fodder. That was like really the argument. Not that it's not happening, but that it's not useful to cover, so we should not cover it. And that just didn't sit with me. So how that pushback happened within the Times was really socially. It was other colleagues and some editors. My boss was actually pretty amazing. And a lot of the bosses at the Times found themselves somewhat flat-footed in this moment, and we can get into that. But it was mostly like, collegial, where the colleagues would police you and say, we're not covering that. And why do you want to cover that? And I had someone say, everyone I describe in the book, there's basically 5 of them in reality. I mean, this was based on one conversation, but I had this conversation with 1 million people. But yeah, I had someone say to me, I don't know why you want to put yourself on the wrong side of history. And when I look back, I want to look at my work and know that it was good for our movement. It was good for this march of progress. And why would you not want that? And I was kind of dumbfounded by the conversation. It really stuck with me. And after I went to one of these zones and reported on Antifa and all the hilarious, absurd stuff that was happening, I mean, also crazy, and there were shootings, and it was a really rich stories. When I came back, basically my colleagues decided I'd crossed the Rubicon. And so they start tweeting out things, how I'm a fascist and a this and a that. And once you violate the law within one of these, and the Times is the same as the Washington Post, same as NPR, all of these organizations have the same set of rules, basically. And once you violate that, you're really on the outs. And you'll see the group of somewhat dissident Times reporters of that era, a lot of them have slowly left. A lot of them spread out into other news organizations that aren't as mainstream and dogmatic.
So I imagine that as you're going through this, there are choices, right? You have a choice. You can kind of say, yeah, okay, I love my job. As I understand from your book, this was absolutely your dream job. Okay, there are some things, I'll just cover the things that seem to work, and no harm, no foul. What kept you from doing that?
Well, I have a kind of contrarian personality, like a little bit of a rebellious personality. As a kid, I was always described as having trouble with authority figures. And it was actually that trait that made me love journalism, because journalism was the job where people who have trouble with authority figures get to get that energy out. It's like running around a track or something. I got to have a lot of trouble with authority figures, and it was really fun for me. That trait just made it impossible at a certain point for me to go along with it. Not to say that I didn't go along with a lot of these sort of new rules for a while. And I really did, and I was very good at it for a while. But it became harder and harder. It just became impossible to not be curious. And then once I sort of got the feeling of rebellion in me where I was like, you guys are going to tell me I can't do this, then I became obsessed with it. And it was all I wanted to cover. And it was all I wanted to think about. I was like, the revolution is everything. And I just couldn't stop myself.
How I think of what you have done with this book and elsewhere is part of the crazy good turn is, it's not like you're trying to play gotcha with, one side. It's just, I'm going to tell you what's going on here, whatever the consequences are, which one might have thought of as sort of the core of journalism, but I guess is not so much anymore.
Yeah, I think that the old idea of objectivity, or even objectivity being always something that's an impossible thing to be, right? You can't perfectly be objective, but the idea was we would try, and we would try to keep our eyes open and keep our minds open and be curious and responsive. Again, knowing that objectivity is impossible. It's like saying kindness. Like, we all want to be kind, but no one is perfectly kind. And that ethos, I liked it. I think it's very good. I think it's a really good ethos for reporters to follow. And so when it got lost and when everything became about just this sort of basic, boring ideology, it's just boring as a writer more than anything. I think about it so venture capitalists always try to say that the tech press is too negative and we're going to start our own. And they're right. The tech press is often too negative. But when they start their own, it ends up just being kind of on-staff writers for Sequoia, a venture firm, and it's boring. And so no one reads it. And when you're writing propaganda or puff pieces, it's boring. It's that the Times and the Washington Post and a lot of NPR, a lot of our mainstream institutions have handcuffed themselves and said, we're not going to look at these stories. We're going to intentionally make it boring to our readers and to our writers. It's astonishing.
The flip side of it is that the penalty for going outside the tribe is pretty high. It's not like people go, oh, okay, well, Nellie's straying a little bit. We'll try to reel her in. It's a pretty violent response.
Yes, a dissident liberal is the most dangerous thing for the movement. So if I was like, you know what, I'm a conservative now, I'm voting for Trump, and I'm this and that, then it would be fine. And actually sort of...
She's lost her mind, let her wander in the desert.
Exactly. But to have someone be like a dissident within the world of liberalism broadly is very dangerous. And so the movement, I don't have any tiny violin to play here. We're great. We're very lucky. Everything turned out well. But the movement obsesses over these dissidents and obsesses over destroying their lives, basically. So you see this with a lot of it is academics who really can't function outside of an institution. There's no secondary market for an academic where they can go direct to consumer. And so you see their lives get destroyed when they question things, when they say, oh, let's study biological sex and talk about this or that, stuff that used to be considered completely normal. Now their entire careers are destroyed and there's no second place for them to go to use that training. So the culture of fear is very real and justified. And for a lot of people, the cost is too high. And I think with journalism, we've been really lucky because we can go direct to consumer.
Yeah, and did you wrestle with the decision on whether, sort of two separate decisions, leaving the New York Times and then publishing your book. Did you wrestle with publishing your book and say, oh, wow, I know this is just going to bring on a lot of anger?
Yeah, I did. I tried to do it in a classy way. I didn't name names. I didn't throw any particular editor under the bus. And I feel good about that. And of course I wrestled with it because also there's a lot of great people at the time. So I don't want it to be oh, the whole place is gone because there's thousands of reporters there and the vast majority are great and do want to do great work. It's just a small ideological faction that's managed to gain a huge amount of control of all of American newsrooms. But the vast majority are still normal people who want to do reporting. So it's sort of, I also wrestled with that aspect. But Yeah, making the choice to leave one of these institutions, it was really hard. I was a mess about it. It took me months. I lost real friends by doing it. I lost real friends by doing the reporting I was doing there. And I mean, it was almost formal in how it was done. They would write me and say, goodbye, basically. And there was one day when I really crossed the line, which was we were all supposed to cancel a young editor and say that this piece that the Times had published put our Black colleagues in danger. And I knew that young editor who had edited the piece. And I just didn't believe it put our colleagues in danger. And so I didn't tweet out the tweet. This sounds so dumb. And for listeners, if this sounds crazy to you, it is crazy and it is so pathetic. But we were all supposed to tweet out this one message, and I didn't. And that day, I got text from a bunch of friends, but from real people in my life who said, if you don't write this, you're not standing with us. You're not showing solidarity with your colleagues who are saying, we need you to post this. And I just couldn't do it. And so after that, then it was really done for me within the movement. And it didn't help that throughout this, I then started dating another dissident reporter or writer at the Times. And so then it became sort of like I was dating this woman who was also a dissident liberal, who was also writing these bad things. And then I was screwed. It was over. And I kind of knew it was over, but it took me a while to get there in my mind. And in part because a lot of the leadership of these places, the Times among them, they don't want this movement to win. They're trying to push against it. And so they were saying, my wonderful editor was saying to me, stick around, it's fine. We're going to get, this moment will pass and all this stuff. And I just didn't believe that was true, at least not for like a decade. And I didn't have a decade to sit around and like be doing internal memos, trying my best to improve. I think there's a beautiful space for people who want to do that. And that's really important work also. And I know there are a lot of people in these institutions working to improve them from the inside. But as a very selfish person, I just was like, I don't have time for this. I can't spend a decade devoted to internal machinations to try to slightly improve an old institution that really didn't want to be changed in those years. And I don't think even now.
So here's the question from my sister on your book. What's been the reaction of your friends and colleagues?
My friends and colleagues now are people in the new world.
Yeah, I guess a divided kind of reaction.
Yeah, it's been really positive. It's been super, super positive. The old world, the Times, the Washington Post, and the New Yorker read brutal reviews. And I was sort of shocked and also delighted by it because it really aroused so much anger in them. I mean, normally when these places don't like a book, they just ignore it. But for me, they were like blasting it out as the most important review written ever. And it was just, these were just slams, just brutal slams, bad writer, boring topic, old news, all the stuff. And I don't know, it was kind of funny to me now to see the focus on it, that they couldn't ignore it was to me a win. And then the book ended up making the Times bestseller list, which was one of the sweetest moments of justice. I was embarrassingly excited, even as I was trying to pretend I didn't care at all.
Can I ask you, as you reflect on it, what do you think accounts for the kind of lack of self-awareness, or maybe at some levels I go, lack of a sense of humor or a sense of perspective on life? How can this be?
Well, the movement and the people in it, the NPR and Washington Post and New York Times, does not believe that there's anything funny going on. And to point to humor is to, first of all, like I said before, give fodder to Republicans. It's to give fodder to critics. And the stakes right now are so high. And there's nothing to laugh at in this situation. And so humor is really problematic in that world. It's really hard for them. I feel bad for them because it seems boring to live like that. But yeah, it's why like stand-up comedians they're obsessed with canceling random stand-up comedians. It's like stand-up comedians are offensive. That's the whole job of the stand-up comedian. Well,
so if you look at the reviews from your former colleagues at the Post and the Times and all the rest, and since the title of your book is The Morning After the Revolution, do you go, wow, this revolution's not over. There is no break in the fever here. People are even just as committed as they were even as a little bit of a return to rationality has happened in places like San Francisco and Seattle and the rest?
I think that the heat of the revolution has somewhat passed. I mean, obviously it has, right? Our cities aren't burning, and a lot of the most egregious policy ideas are being pulled back. You don't see much outrage over the return of the SAT, which for a few years we were told that the SAT is the white supremacy. I could ramble about that for a while, but you definitely see a pullback from some of the more embarrassing fringe arguments. But I think as the heat has wound down, it's in part because of the movement's success. It's because the movement has so successfully won in so many of our institutions. So the revolution's ending, but it's not leaving us in the same place where it began. It's leaving us in a new place where a lot of wins have been made. I mean, I think about, there's this Columbia student who said in a video that he ended up later posting himself, but he said to a group of administrators who were meeting with him to talk about some punishment for something else he said, I want to kill Zionists, and you're lucky I'm not killing them right now. And he said that to a group of Columbia administrators, a group of professional adults within the university who have the authority to punish this guy. And he wasn't punished. And it was completely an okay thing to say. And he walked out, and the only reason that we heard about it is because he posted the video of him saying it himself to that group, because it was some sort of panel done on Zoom. And then once the video went viral and there was outrage, then the university said, oh my gosh, we have to suspend him. We're going to suspend him. But to me, the most important part of that little moment was that he had said it to a group of administrators at Columbia University, an Ivy League school, and he hadn't gotten in trouble. So that tells you that something has shifted within the institution where that's allowed. And it's just, I think that in many of our institutions now, there are conversations and demands put on people and put on students that are really, really different from 5 years ago. And so you can't say that just because the police weren't abolished, that the movement didn't win.
So that is a great way to segue to the Free Press and what you're doing there. And I follow the Free Press. I read everything you guys write, and you're really clever and thoughtful. Maybe a little bit of the story behind that and how that is going.
Yeah, so the dissident writer I was dating at the Times, she quit before me in a kind of fiery splash. That's a bad metaphor, a fiery splash, but you get what I mean. And she had this idea for a new media company. And the original idea was it was going to be a huge media company with all these different branches. And I was more like of a practical, I call it like a weasel mind. I was just like, let's start like a newsletter. Let's start like a really basic thing and just collect some email addresses for now. And so I set up barryweiss.substack.com. Of course, screwed up a million things, including just like the URL. Why did I choose that URL? I don't know, but it like caused all kinds of problems. I was doing our accounting for the first year. It was a mess. But we started this little newsletter that was mostly, I mean, she is an editor, an opinion writer, and pulls together different voices and is a genius at curation. And so she started curating all of the different dissident people and building the Free Press. And we've just seen it grow, and it's been amazing.
Well, it's a terrific product is where I would start. Is the podcast is terrific. The writing is terrific. It's honest. It's a very honest reporting and opinion pieces.
I think that because of all the stories that are not being covered, there's just a lot of low-hanging fruit. And so it wasn't even that hard to find all these different beats that we could just own and very easily and just start writing about it. And it would be considered wild and shocking. I mean, we were writing about puberty blockers when that was considered verboten in mainstream media. And turns out a lot of parents wanted to know a little bit more about what was going on with all that, or writing about COVID origins, or writing about just all these different things that are so interesting. And so the publication grew, and it started making my partner, Sasha, now my wife's salary. It started like making her old salary at the Times, and then it made double her salary at the Times. And I was just watching this like, holy shit. I was looking at the line and I was like, this might be a company. At the time I thought, oh, I'll leave the Times and freelance for other magazines. And then I was like, no, I'm going all in. We're all in on the Substack. And it's just been amazing. It's been so joyful and positive, and it's become a refuge for a lot of people from the old media to come and use those skills, use the reporting skills. One of the first hires we made was a fact checker and a copy editor, right? Someone who makes sure our facts are really good and tight. Like we have the standards of the old world, but trying to have the mindset of the new, which is just more open-minded. But I think, one of the things about the new world that's risky is without the institutions and the guardrails, it's hard to keep your bearings. And I think about COVID and stuff, and you see a lot of people who started questioning COVID and some of the lies the government was telling us, then spin out too far and start believing any conspiracy theory they see. And you have to kind of guard yourself. And one thing that we've been trying to do at the Free Press is build a community that is its own little institution, rather than just we're all free-floating bloggers online kind of posting whatever comes to our heads. But it's been great. I was thinking about leaving the Times and how scared I was, and I asked all these people for advice. And my parents are supportive of whatever we want to do and sort of amused by the chaotic antics we all get up to, my siblings and I. But I think they were a little bit shocked that I would leave the Times, and especially to go to a place like a Substack. What is this? And I just feel, so grateful that I took that risk. But it was also an easy risk to take in a lot of ways because I was young, healthy, no kids. It's an easy time to take risks in your life. I think now I'm still young-ish and healthy, but I have kids. I think I'd be a little bit more scared of taking a risk. And I understand, which is all to say, I understand why a lot of people don't just quit a bad institution and say, to hell with it, because it's hard to do that.
There's a line in your book about not being able to unsee complexity. And that strikes me as one of the things you all are doing with the Free Press is you're showing people some of the complexity, and it's so much more interesting seeing the complexity. Where do you see the Free Press being 3 to 5 years from now?
For a while, I was so scared because I thought, well, if the New York Times and the Washington Post decide to be 5%, 10% less crazy, they could take our business. If they decide to start reporting on some of these stories, oh my God, we're done. And they just haven't made that choice. And so I see the Free Press growing. We've been growing, and I'd like it to be a new American institution that is a home for people who want great stories, great writing, great reporting. I want us to do more events. I want us to have more beats. I think early on we were focused a lot on the thing that Bear and I were both coming from, which was internal battles within liberalism. And so early on, that was most of our coverage was about the internal battle within liberalism. And I think now we're trying to branch out, and we want to, have beat reporters who cover things on the ground and bring breaking news and things like that. But keeping it sustainable and keeping it, one thing that we're very lucky on is the timing for starting a subscription business was very good because ads have crashed. So ad-based businesses are a mess. And subscribers, I like writing for subscribers. I like that as a structure. So I see us growing in that and making a better and better newsletter every year.
So, not related necessarily to the Free Press, more general question. Who, in your view, isn't getting enough attention today? Who should our listeners be paying more attention to?
Well, I'm really biased, but I would say that the writer Abigail Shrier, she's one of our good friends, and she was very early on the issues around teen girls and gender dysphoric contagion. So sort of how a lot of otherwise healthy teen girls spend a lot of time online and convince themselves of different esoteric gender identities. And she was very early to say, we should just give them a minute to think about things before we medicalize them. This might not be exactly what we think this is. And she wrote a book on it, and it was great. And she was early. And she's someone who I think about a lot. Like you asked me, the revolution ending. Abigail Shrier never got apologies from the people who smeared her as a transphobe for writing that book. Even as now, the things she was arguing a few years ago are literally the law of the land in England, literally the law of the land across Europe at this point. She never got vindicated or apologized to. Yeah, I just think she is so brave and impressive. And people should go back and read that book. And her new book was at #1 on Amazon, blah, blah. She's certainly extraordinarily successful. She's not an little known writer, but her last book was just very, very brave. And she's very, very brave.
So I ask this for everyone who's on the podcast. Who is someone who's done a crazy good turn for you?
I would say I went to a little boarding school in Southern California, and my dorm head / advisor, it's kind of ambiguous role. His name was Bob Bonning, or is Bob Bonning, and he completely made me the person who I am. I arrived as a really rebellious, angry 14-year-old. My parents had gone through divorce. I was sort of pissed off at everything. And he just took me under his wings and was this like curmudgeonly, funny guy with a goatee who would hang out outside the dorm and have a cigarette and then come back and like tell us what to do and all of this. And he really saw who I was very young and embraced it and let me be who I was. And so I wanted to do the school newspaper, and I didn't want to play lacrosse. I didn't want to play team sports, and we all had to play team sports at school. But he kind of let me sneak off and not do team sports, and instead just do the school newspaper all afternoon. And he was the first person who told me that he thought I was a writer, and that I should probably do that. But he told it in like a curmudgeonly way, like, "You're writing a lot. They say it's pretty good. You should probably look into that." Like he was very low key and dry. And just very accepting of a little rebellious teen version of me, which was really fun.
That's awesome. No, that's good. That's terrific.
I've written him many thank yous over the years.
Well done.
But yeah, he was very influential in my life. And I think anyone who wants to do stuff that you can't fully buck a community if you don't feel safe somewhere else. And because of my family and people like Bob Bonning, I felt very safe in a lot of ways in my life. And so it felt okay to say goodbye to a place like the Times and to the old world prestige and to say, you know what, I don't need it. And that's okay. Because there's a lot of people in my life who love me no matter what. And I have a lot of safety in other ways. And yeah, I think that was essential to be able to take risks in professional ways.
That is fantastic. That is terrific. Well, he is much to be thanked. And thank you, Nellie. This was terrific. Your book is awesome. And I encourage all of our listeners, we're going to be giving away copies of your book. And I also encourage all our listeners to listen to the podcast and read the free press on your Substack. And I one final question that just occurred to me as we're signing off on your book. So if someone buys your book or gets this book as part of our podcast, to whom would you recommend that they give the book after they finish reading it?
I would say give it to sort of your coolest young cousin or grand cousin or someone who might read this and have their mind changed or opened a little bit. I think that would be a good person to give it to.
That is perfect. Well, thank you. Thank you again, Nellie. This is really a pleasure. And again, congratulations on your book.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on.
I hope you've enjoyed our conversation with Nellie. If you did, I'd like to invite you to sign up for a chance to win a free copy of her book, Morning After the Revolution. We'll be giving away 50 copies to listeners like you. You can claim your entry by visiting crazygoodturns.org, and you'll find a link to the giveaway along with the show notes from today's episode. We appreciate your listening to our show. If you like what you've heard, please share Crazy Good Turns with your friends. Please also support our show by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the podcasting platform of your choice. And connect with us on the social network of your choice. You'll find us at Crazy Good Turns, all one word. As always, I want to thank the team that makes Crazy Good Turns possible. Our producers, Brian Sabin and Megan Hanlon, editing and mixing by Score, and Leslie Nunn for keeping our operation going forward. Lastly, I want to express my gratitude to you, our listeners, for being part of a community that celebrates people who do great things for others. Your giving of your time to listen to these interviews and acknowledge these good deeds is a crazy good turn of its own. Thank you for your help. We hope to see you again soon in our next episode when we celebrate another crazy good turn.